As of starting this script, I beat Phantasy Star 4 one day ago. Try it. Let's go! Success! GG's. Already, I think this may have become one of my favorite RPGs I've ever played. Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, ladies, gentlemen, or otherwise. My name is Marcus Future. You can call me the Timeline Man, and welcome back to my series of videos where I try to appreciate each and every game in the Phantasy Star franchise. I make no promises as to the schedule of when these videos come out, but they will come out eventually. Like I said just a moment ago, I truly think Phantasy Star 4 has become one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I might make a list video about all of them someday, but at least to the scale of Phantasy Star, this is, as of right now, my second favorite Phantasy Star game, and it's definitely my favorite of the original 4. I feel like saying Phantasy Star 4 is the best of the original quadrilogy is a relatively uncontroversial statement among retro gaming as a whole, though the other three have their die-hard fans within the Phantasy Star community on its own. It's certainly not hard to see why, though. So here, I have another glowing review of Phantasy Star 4 End of the Millennium. Another one for the heat. There are many ways to go about reviewing this game, and honestly, it feels like they've all been done already. Every compliment that could be paid to this game has already been done, so actually, you know what? I'm going to take a unique angle to this video. See, the other thing I've done on this channel recently, other than post Phantasy Star stuff, is make my own video game. My first game was a hot mess, but I'm working on the sequel to it, and I started Phantasy Star 4 while I was just a little ways into the process of making it. I think this game has changed the way I think about telling my story and developing my games. So that's what I'm going to talk about instead. The way that this game changed the way that I look at story beats, cutscene presentation, characterization, and dungeon design. There's a lot to get through, so let's get started. The story of Phantasy Star 4 is interesting because, especially next to the rest of the quadrilogy, it's kind of meandering. In the other three, the story objectives are rather direct, but the path is obscured. In 1, you have to beat Lassic. Everything along the way is either an obstacle or preparation for fighting Lassic at the end of the game. 2 is a very direct line from biomonsters to climate troll and then to deal with Mother Brain. Very two-step process. Phantasy Star 3 had a plot. Probably. Don't ask me. 4 is rather friendly. Objectives are usually pretty short-term, with the only real long-term objective throughout most of the game being to fight Zio, which isn't even the final boss of the game. This allows the characters in Journey a little time to breathe. There isn't one big looming event on the horizon. There are a few smaller motivations working with each other in shorter bursts. Characters cycle in and out of their section of the story, and I find it really keeps things well paced and interesting, while also creating a feeling that these characters are real and have lives. One thing that definitely adds to it is that there are characters who know your party members. You can meet Han's fiance and his parents. You can talk to people who know Grease and Raja, people who are jealous of Alice and Chaz. There's an exception, which is Rika and the androids, because they've never been anywhere. They aren't citizens of these planets. They don't go anywhere, so no one knows who they are. This short-term focus also allows for much more natural feeling escalation of conflict. From a standard job, gone a little sideways, planting the seeds to meet Zio, and Zio in turn planting the seeds about Darkfalls, whose multiple appearances grant the possibility to create profound darkness. It all felt pretty natural when I played it, and each story section allowed for character writing to really shine, with each segment's group establishing a pretty decent dynamic each time. This sort of structure of the story beats has been incredibly helpful when it comes to the way I think about writing for New Dawn for the Elements. With the appearance of multiple character motivations, joining and separating characters, as opposed to most RPGs I've played up until this point, where they might have a unique motivation at first, but then they just kind of absorb into whatever the grand scheme of things is at the end. It's not a bad way to handle the story, but I needed to think differently for New Dawn specifically, and this game really opened up my mind to more options. The way story scenes play out is rather unique in this game. There are two ways that they play out, like a stage play and like a comic book. The stage play method is the pretty standard method for RPGs, especially by this point. Characters move around to accentuate the fact of the content of the scene and to prevent the whole thing becoming standing around and talking. That's not really what I want to focus on here. The other part is the really unique part, that sort of comic book panel by panel method of showing the story. It allows, first of all, for more dynamic scene composition, where you can do things like emphasize character expressions and postures, or show the sky that you normally can't see in a top-down game like this. With that composition, it also allows for greater control over the emotional pacing of the scene. Characters don't have to awkwardly shuffle around for the next part of the scene if they can silently be moved off camera, so to speak. Distances are subjective before this method of presenting a scene. Really, it has all the benefits of comic books as a medium for storytelling. A minor thing it also allows for is for characters to be in different outfits. If the game only presented things from the usual game perspective, an outfit change would be 9 entirely new sprites. But here, that could just be 1 or 2 pictures. I like this method of story presentation so much that early on, I had considered copying the method wholesale, which is just a bunch of comic panels and such. But I came to realize just how much work that'd be, and I stopped. This is a lot. It's a lot of different art. Phantasy Star 4 mitigated the amount of art by reusing images quite a number of times. There's a few places where you can point out, like, oh, this is the same front sprite from before. That's smart. Of course, I'm using just flat PNGs, so like, I don't know, I could probably save time, but it wouldn't save me any space. What I did instead was I created full event CGs, which is something I'm used to seeing in visual novels. These show up somewhat frequently throughout the story to tell something special in the scene. By doing it this way, I also get to create one of my favorite things in a game, an image gallery, baby! But that's besides the point. It's just a little bit of fun you can have with changing the story presentation. Anyway, moving on. Some of this will be repointed info from the story beat section, so let me say that first. The characters in this world feel like they live here. There are people who know them, characters they know, they have friends, family, co-workers, stuff like that. Beyond that, each character gets little moments and main scenes and little talk segments where these are things you can use as a hint if you get lost. And they all have little bits. There's stuff like how Raja tells bad jokes, or Kira thinks of herself as a big sister, how Alice has a big old crush on Rune, and Rune has a very sibling-esque relationship with Chaz. It's very fun. These are little things that really endear me, at least. I really thought I made them very endearing as characters. And part of what helps us is with the comic style scenes, we get a lot of characterization that isn't normally seen in games of this era. We get stuff like body language. We get to see how, like, the party stands around, how they act. Like, one of the things they do is they have, like, a relaxing bit after, like, the first big mission, after you encounter Zio for the first time, and that's presented in a comic book style. And so we get to see Chaz with, like, a cup of coffee, I think, if I remember correctly. Hopefully I could get the picture and put it here. It's very interesting too, because this is on the same system as Phantasy Star 3, which had to cut things to fit onto the stuff. But it kind of seemed like Phantasy Star 4 had room to spare somehow, with at least 2 instances I can recall where cutscene animation was made to be used exactly once. There's a point in time where Alice just punches someone early on because they start listing off her measurements. And then there's an entirely optional sword performance Chaz does exceptionally late in the game. He does a little dance thing. It's like he's like shadowboxing with a sword. It's very cute. But it only shows up there Because, like, these aren't animations from the fighting or anything, because that's not how the fighting is presented. It's boggles the mind, truly. I don't know, why is like that, but, like, I don't know if I feel this way because I started playing this, like, almost immediately after finishing Phantasy Star 2, whose characters don't do or say anything for 99% of the story, but I really liked how well this game was able to implement characters as an active part of the story, rather than as passive recipients of destiny that were so common around this time in RPG history. It really does fuel my case against silent protagonists, but that's a topic for a different day. I've played a lot of RPGs with varying takes on what dungeons should be, ranging from Phantasy Star 1 and 2's dense labyrinths to Nocturne's puzzly, rage-inducing areas. I've played many, but for some reason, very few of them have really pierced my thick skull to make me understand why I felt like some of my own dungeon designs have been lame as hell in the past. I think it comes down to the fact that dungeons in Phantasy Star 4 are fairly simple, but create stimulating navigation challenges in most cases. The dungeons have the usual trappings of a decent RPG, forked paths, many of which have worthwhile treasure, but not all of them. Layouts memorable and distinct enough that even with the fact that it's all repeating tiles, tracing over your steps isn't impossible, and stuff like that, but it condenses most of it down into rather small areas. Along with, like, one or two puzzle elements, but they aren't... It's not a puzzle game. The game's not a puzzle game, but it has a few puzzle elements a couple times, but they're very simple that I didn't even really recognize them as puzzles. Which worked most of the time, only failing a couple times toward the end there. But the way the game manages to create navigation that is fun and challenging is by weaving its areas together intricately. Floors link at multiple points, and you're usually never too far away from some sort of door or stair to a different area, which creates something of a point of intrigue. It's kind of like a treasure chest for adventure. Just by seeing the door, you're like, what's behind it? And yeah, this may seem a little obvious to some designers, but if you've played my games, you may notice that that's far from how I've designed my dungeons, like at all, in the past. I've usually made large floors, some might say too large, that were pretty open, and the only point of intrigue was the stairs to the next floor, which is a very mystery dungeon way of designing, and I'm hoping to make things a little more interesting in my future projects with lessons I learned here. There are definitely other games where I could have learned this lesson just as well, if not better, but that's how it happened for me. This is the one where I learned. I'm just glad to have learned it. Those were the lessons I learned from this game, but now I've got some things to say for the game itself. As established before, I want to talk about the game's impact on the franchise as a whole. Unfortunately, near as I could tell, 4's influence is rather limited. This was the last traditional RPG of the franchise, so mechanically very little transfers to future titles. There's no real use for things like macros or anything like that, or even the skill system. Oh, it does kind of, there are bits of the skill systems that are, like, if you squint, it's like, oh, that could be photon arts. Maybe. I don't know. It didn't really shift the point of nostalgia either, because PSO1 kind of uses the entire quadrilogy as the point of nostalgia. Reiko Kodama's designs are no longer part of the franchise after this game, and you could tell very quickly. There are a couple big pieces that are important for later. Profound Darkness is a huge one. It's not directly addressed in every subsequent series of game, but PSO2 and Universe did make heavy use of it as a recurring villain. And speaking of Universe, and spoilers for Universe and Phantasy Star 4, Rickrows! It looks different in Universe, but it's there! And finally, what did I think of the game? Well, honestly, like I said, it's one of my favorite RPGs now, entering into a hall with such titles as Xenoblade Chronicles, Neo The World Ends With You, and Infinite Dunamis. Meaning, it's actually one of my only favorites that I think has like a standard-ish turn-based system. I've always said I'm not very good at action RPGs. I don't like very many of them, but a lot of my favorites are very action-y. don't worry about that. I don't have time to unpack that right now. So overall, I give Phantasy Star 4 a 10 out of 10. It's a good game, and I recommend it if you like RPGs at all. I know, not exactly a revolutionary opinion, but hey, sometimes the crowds are, in fact, correct. There's a caveat there. Phantasy Star 4, it does use the previous 3 games as a lot of framing and reference for stuff. There's a lot of reference to the previous 3 games. But you know, if you're okay with just a little bit of, I don't know what that is, then you're fine. Which I understand isn't a very common thing nowadays. Like, a lot of people feel like they need to understand everything that's happening. But I don't know. I grew up jumping into the middle of book series, so maybe I'm weird. But that's all for this one. Subscribe if you like Phantasy Star content. A few of these have been doing pretty well. The rest of the series will be getting videos eventually, which means we're about to enter the online era. Oh boy. And until next we meet, stay safe out there, and look out for each other, because no one should be alone when the going gets rough.